So welcome back for week 7. I apologize for how I look. I recorded this video before and then I was at home editing it and realized there's nothing but clicking noises, so hopefully that doesn't turn out to be the case in this one. So we're going to deal with ethical research and we're going to view it from 3 different angles. The first one is something that you're all going to be asked to run through, whether it applies to you or not, and that's something called the IRB, or an Institutional Review Board. Basically, it's a group of people who determine is the research that you're planning on doing, that especially when it pertains to a person, are you doing things that follow certain guidelines? And in university and in medicine and in other type of pharmaceutical research, this is a huge deal. For us, it's not going to be as big of a deal because you're not going to be as invasive, or at least I'm going to try and persuade you not to be, but it's something that we still have to do nonetheless. So I'm going to be asking everyone to go through the IRB process, which is the focus of this week. And it's going to drive some of you nuts because it's a lot of work. The IRB came about due to 3 sets of codes and rules and reports that came about. The first one came out after World War II, when the Nazis were experimenting on people who were mentally disabled and people who were Jewish and things along those lines. But also, in part, even though this wasn't a direct cause, it's what the Japanese were doing too. So we first came up with the giant list of things that we called the Nuremberg Code. And you could see them on the screen. Some of them you recognize, some of them you don't. But it turns out there are issues with this list because we can bypass our way around it, such as voluntary consent. Well, what is voluntary consent? Oh, I say yes. Consent is yes, volunteer. I'm saying I'm okay with it. I'm not being coerced. The problem is that doesn't mean you understand what's happening to you. So we came up with something else called the Declaration of Helsinki, which includes, among all of these things, the IRB, the Institutional Review Board, and informed consent, meaning I have to understand what's happening before I say yes. But even then, this doesn't give us enough, so there was a further report referred to as the Belmont Report, which is what were the limitations of your research. And it requires all of these things, and it has a whole bunch of other components to it. So we as a school district need to have an IRB, and we're actually working on that right now. Mr. Hume, who teaches this course over at Marina, he and I are going through this lovely little packet to actually assemble an IRB for the district, and it's going to be fun for us and fun for you too. So who's required to run through an IRB? Basically, anyone who's doing subject or research on humans. There are a few exemptions to this, and if you're not dealing with humans, it's still good to run through it, and they just say, okay, yeah, you're doing things the right way in terms of storage of data and stuff like that. But for the most part, IRB is a massive pain, and it's supposed to be a massive pain. When I went through this at Long Beach for my master's, it took a month for them to go through everything, which was pretty fast, because normally it's like 2 or 3 months. And I had to still do, I think, 2 or 3 sets of revisions. And all I did was give a survey. And I still had to go through all sorts of things. So we want to believe, or we want to accept what you do, your actual work, as being ethically done. But you also need to convince me and convince the other readers that the research that you are doing, the little r research, is also something that's credible. So among those things is we have to know, are your sources decent? So on the screen there's some questions that you should be asking whenever you read sources. For the sake of pointing it out about Wikipedia, just because some people just jump to Wikipedia, it's a encyclopedia, meaning it's a collection of information, but it's not the source of information. If you ever go to a Wikipedia page, what you should do is go to the bottom of the page, because the bottom of the page actually has their references, so you can see where did they get their information from. That is what you really should be looking at, not the Wikipedia page. And this applies to all your classes. Wikipedia is not bad, it's just not a source. You should be using their sources, and then using those sources to jump to other sources, if you're totally stuck as to where to go. So like I said, we need to know if we can trust where you're getting your information. If you're going to a website, because some research isn't going to be in peer-reviewed journals, you are going to need to look at websites. the more of these questions that you can answer, the more reliable the website turns out to be, and the more credibility lands into it. If you can't tell me who the author is, or you don't know when it was last modified or when it was written, if you can't find that type of information, it's probably not a good source for you. So the more of these you can answer, the better it is. The last bit is we have to make sure that I'm trusting what you're writing is your writing. So I have to trust your process, I have to trust your sources, but I also have to trust what you yourself are writing, and that would be plagiarism. Plagiarism comes in two varieties. The first variety is you plagiarize, but you didn't mean to plagiarize, like you forgot quotes or you're paraphrasing statements like this entire page here, I took from the Bedford Researcher, but I tell you that I took it from the Bedford Researcher, the edition, and I told you the page number. So if I didn't have that parenthetical comment there, I would be plagiarizing this entire page. Even though I didn't mean or intend to plagiarize the page, I kind of did. That would qualify as unintended plagiarism. The other thing that sometimes lands, and this will get you in trouble in college, is so a lot of people use Turnitin. So if you turned in a paper in high school for Turnitin.com or in one class in college, and then you take a different course and it turns out to be very similar to something that you've already previously written, you're like, oh, well, I already wrote something pretty good on that, and then you use that again, you're plagiarizing yourself. And in college, that could result in either a 0 on the assignment, a 0 in the class. You can fail classes just for one act of plagiarism, or they kick you out of the university. So here, don't plagiarize yourself. If you are saying something that you have published before, meaning you've written it and you've turned it online, quote yourself. And you need to cite yourself as a source because that's exactly what you're doing. That's different than intended plagiarism, which is probably not what you're going to do. You will probably end up accidentally plagiarizing, and that's why we're going to be checking to make sure you don't do that. But what you need to make sure that you're not doing is any of these things. No proper citation, or you're purposefully not telling me the source, or you're leaving stuff out, or you have it in the body but you don't have it down below. You're plagiarizing, you're intentionally plagiarizing, and this is a big deal. Because one of the things that I had to put into my syllabus to get this course approved is this entire text, which is they catch you plagiarizing, you just get a 0 on the task, which means it is actually possible in AP Seminar and AP Research to get a 0 as a score, which is kind of really sad. So you shouldn't do that. Be ethical in what you do. So we're going to go through IRB. Make sure you have credible sources for your background research and in that annotated bibliography, and don't plagiarize.